that people are doing. So, well, you see, first and foremost, you guys wanted to see the phones? Well, here you go. Secondly, I think this one's going to be particularly interesting because the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, you see, it came out a few months ago, but it has received a plethora of updates. And because of that, I feel we're gonna see certain surprises. I'm not entirely certain about them, but, well, let's just call it a bit of an intuition, shall we? And so let's jump in, because the Oppo Find X7 Ultra, it is also quite the beast right here. Alright, as usual, first and foremost, we got those color profiles, right? So, the Oppo does have a vibrant color profile, which I don't really like to use it. It doesn't look all that nice. Comparatively speaking, take a look at what Xiaomi is doing. We have like a vibrant going on here. It's balanced. It maybe could use a little bit more vibrance, considering that it is a vibrant color profile, but well, I'll take it. I prefer the more natural muted colors anyways. And so, wholeheartedly, I would recommend that you use the regular color profile on the Find X7 Ultra. Now on the Xiaomi, we are using the Leica Authentic, and yes, it jacks up the contrast. I would say the contrast level is fairly similar on both, maybe a pinch higher on the Xiaomi, but it is really well balanced on both of them. I really have no genuine complaints. It looks fantastic, to be honest. Now the main camera close-up, see, I think this is where both phones struggle a little bit because you can't really get as close with your main cameras. Like the minimum focus distance isn't particularly great on either. It's not bad. You can get a nice looking shot. I mean, this is a fantastic looking shot, especially the contrast on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. It is one of those things that the Xiaomi seems to nail as per my personal preferences. I do want to preface that because my preference is that we get tons of contrast without really crushing or blowing out anything. The Oppo, on the other hand, goes for a much more balanced and a relatively safer approach, which is fine, but my personal preference will always go to Xiaomi. And of course, we cannot forget about our backlit shots, right? So, the sun did pop out for a little bit and well, it was in that window that I took basically all of my backlit shots, this one included. So, here, I think the Xiaomi is kind of crushing shadows a little bit. We are using Leica Authentic again, and that is the tendency. It doesn't really boost shadows as much. The Oppo, I think, is doing a perfect job with the balance. It has enough contrast, but it also has more than enough shadow detail to not look crushed. You can use Leica Vibrant on the Xiaomi to sort of remedy the situation. You're getting significantly more shadow detail now, even more than what the Oppo is giving us. But well, to be fair, it is a bit of a hassle. Switching things up every time the lighting changes, not really worthwhile now, is it? Especially on a flagship. Moving on, however, let's check out the ultrawide camera. So this is the regular ultrawide shot and no surprise, both are doing a stunning job. The only reason I personally prefer the Xiaomi is because I feel it has slightly more natural colors and slightly less vibrance as opposed to the Find X7 Ultra. And that's really about it because everything else looks stunning. Now here's another one. This is like semi-backlit, like the sun is right behind the building and you can kind of see a bit of the sunlight peeking out from the right side over there. But the biggest difference that I'm seeing right here is a field of view because bloody hell, the Xiaomi is so much wider than the Find X7 Ultra, like damn. It is just massive, to say the least, and it really puts the Ultra in ultra-wide, doesn't it? Then of course we have the ultra-wide backlit, and I think both look fairly nice. I think in this case, even with Leica Authentic on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, it looks great. I have no real complaints. Both of them are producing really nice, really well balanced shots. And you know what? That really speaks volumes about just how good these cameras have gotten lately. Now then, macro. So this is with the ultrawide camera. I would say personally the ultrawide cameras on both of these are not quite good for macro. You can use them. There are options that you have available for use, but I would recommend that you don't, because with both of them, you can utilize a telephoto camera 6x on the Find X7 Ultra, just so you know. And you can get slightly better shots. I would say the Xiaomi is doing a slightly better job in this case, because it is handling the contrast and exposure a little bit better. It looks a little overexposed and flat on the Oppo, but from a macro capability standpoint, I would say both are doing a fairly nice job. Xiaomi is actually getting a little bit closer to the subject here. Anywho, let us move on to zoom. So first and foremost, we have a regular main camera shot, and unsurprisingly, both are doing a stunning job. The Xiaomi does have a little bit more contrast. I personally actually prefer how the Oppo is balancing everything out without really crushing some of the very minor shadows, especially on the right side of the image. But then 2x, now this is where things will start to get interesting. So once again, it's a similar situation. You see, the Xiaomi is really jacking up the contrast. And I don't think it's particularly bad, and the Find X7 Ultra is not all that far off, but I believe that it is kind of towing the line between high contrast and crushing shadows. It's a very minor difference, but when we crop into 500% with the 2x sensor crop, I do think the Xiaomi is doing a slightly better job. It's again a minor difference in the sharpening and the way the image is being handled, and yes, I do see a little bit more sharpening and processing artifacts on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, but the Oppo looks particularly soft and there are some artifacts there even though it's not sharpening as much. Now then for 3x, so this is optical zoom on both of these phones. And secondly, I do want to point out that both of these are now handling the exposure and the contrast, the balance particularly well. Like, I don't really have anything to complain about. But it is going to be the details that are going to be the most interesting, right? Because as you can probably tell, the Xiaomi is without question producing more detail. And I think the problem is that the Oppo just doesn't really bring out details as much. The camera is good, the sensors are great on both, but I do believe that this really just comes down to processing, and the processing doesn't really bring out the details nearly as much or as nicely, I guess, as the Xiaomi does. Now here we have a final zoom, which is 5x on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra and 6x on the Find X7 Ultra. And you know what? It is bloody incredible just how many smartphones we have had this year with multiple telephoto zoom levels. It's really something. I've used 3 personally this year, and I believe Huawei also has something similar. I'm not entirely certain about that, but I think so. Moving on to 10x, and this is where we have a little bit of a problem. So the detail preservation is fairly nice on both, but the Oppo is drastically underexposed. I'm not really sure why it happened, and when I saw it happen, I did take multiple shots, exact same results, so it's a little unfortunate. For 30x, here's the interesting thing. So the Oppo is once again underexposing. Very unfortunate, obviously, but the detail preservation is basically the same on both. Now it could be that maybe the fact that the Oppo has a 6x as opposed to a 5x on the Xiaomi, maybe that's compensating for it, or it could just be that either the sensor quality is slightly better as opposed to what we are seeing with the 3x on the Find X7 Ultra, or it could just be the processing taking better advantage of the 6x camera as opposed to the 3x sensor. I'm not entirely certain about the reasoning, but these are the results we're getting. Now, let us check out high resolution. You see, this is where something interesting happens, as you can probably tell. The Oppo is a little bit overexposed, not just in the shadows but also in the highlights. I mean, check out the clouds, they're completely blown out. The Xiaomi is blowing out some of the clouds, like in the lower part of the image, or rather lower part of the sky. But I think the balance and the exposure is much better handled on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. But with details, I do think the Oppo is now doing a better job, because we're just getting so much more with so much less processing and artifacting. I can see a whole bunch of sharpening on the Xiaomi, but the details are still somehow, at least they appear less as opposed to the Find X7 Ultra. Now for the ultrawide camera, the tables have turned with the exposure and the HDR essentially, because now the Xiaomi is completely blowing out the left side of the sky. Like, why is it even blowing out so much of it? I have no idea. The Oppo, on the other hand, is doing a sheerly exceptional job right here. It's quite something. And then with the details, once again, as you can tell, the Find X7 Ultra just appears to have more detail being brought out. The Xiaomi, on the other hand, it would appear that it has not just less detail, but also some amount of smearing going on in the shadows, and a whole bunch more noise and grain. You might not be able to see all of it on YouTube, but trust me, it is all there. Now of course, every single rear camera on both of these has high res, so naturally, we gotta check out 3x. Now in my opinion, I do think that the contrast and the balancing is significantly better on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. It looks really flat on the Oppo, but the detail preservation on the Oppo, it shot up, didn't it? Because previously, with the regular 3x shots, we didn't really get nearly as much detail. The high res boosted it up all the way to high heaven and then back. And now finally we have high res with the final telephoto cameras, 5x on the Xiaomi versus 6x on the Find X7 Ultra. Now naturally, this isn't exactly a fair comparison because the Find X7 does crop in more, or rather punch in more with the zoom. But as you can tell, when we crop in to check out details, it doesn't really matter because the Xiaomi is doing a monumentally better job as opposed to the Oppo. I gotta say, I'm completely flummoxed here because the Oppo was doing a really good job with regular 6x, 10x and 30x photos. But with high res, it turns out that the 3x is really good. And at 6x, it doesn't perform as well. Why are the tables turning so damn much in this one? Anyways, let's move on and check out Selfies. So, there's a fairly simple shot, there's nothing really crazy going on, and I would say both are looking fairly nice. Personally, I do prefer the Xiaomi because it is high contrast. It's as simple as that, but I would say you could just go for either here. In this case, however, the lighting is slightly more difficult, and I think both are looking fairly nice. It's as if I prefer how I look on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, and on the Oppo, although the contrast on me is not that high, but the contrast behind me, the sky especially, like the clouds, you can see them so much better as opposed to what's happening on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. It is interesting just the way they're handling these images. But I guess if I had to pick one, I'd go with the Xiaomi because it is handling the subject a little bit better. You once again would not go wrong with either of these. But with the backlit selfie, this is just ridiculous because just a few days ago I made the camera comparison with the Find X7 Ultra and the Vivo X100 Pro. In that comparison, it was struggling beyond belief with these backlit selfies and backlit portrait selfies. Somehow now it is handling it like a champ. I don't even know what to say. Because it's doing a basically equal job. There's a bit of lens flaring on both, but outside of that it looks about as good as you could get given the situation. Anywho, with selfie portraits, there's two things with the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. I like the colors on the Xiaomi. I think it looks a little bit more natural, a little bit more realistic, especially with the greens in the background. They look a little too vibrant for my personal taste on the Oppo. But I also really don't like the fact that it forces you to kind of crop in to take a portrait selfie as opposed to just using the entire field of view. But those are just minor complaints in the long run. But then for this shot, once again, I do prefer the colors, especially the color of the grass in the background on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, but it is struggling with the highlight because there was a lot of sunlight hitting me right at the edge of my face, and the Oppo is doing a significantly better job. It is near ideal in the way it is handling the highlights. And here we have our backlit portrait selfie once again. If you don't believe me, check out the previous comparison I made. The link to all the playlists for these phones and also the X100 Pro is in the description, but how is it performing so much better? I don't think we received an update. As far as I can remember, it did not receive an update. How is it doing so much better of a job in this comparison where arguably the sun is way brighter as opposed to the previous one? I don't know. What I do know, however, is that neither of these are very good with night selfies because look, there exists a singular flagship that I've used this year which can do proper, really genuinely high quality night selfies, and that's the S24 Ultra. It kinda does bother me that every other flagship does have this feature, but they can't really do it right. Look, here's the deal. The Oppo has fairly nice looking portraits, as you can tell. The Xiaomi, on the other hand, it has a horrible history with portraits because about as much as I can remember with every single comparison I made with the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, the one thing that I have complained about are the portraits being extremely inconsistent, but as you can tell, it's a strong start. This is master portrait mode and it looks stunning. I would say a little bit better with the skin tones as opposed to the Oppo, which feels really cooled off, a little too cooled off in my opinion. Especially you can see the blue happening on my shirt, which was black. Now we also need to check out Leica portraits, right? Because, well, usually one works and the other doesn't. Well, that's how it used to be. Because once again, it's doing a near exceptional job. The colors are perfect. And maybe there's a little bit too much brightening in my face. That would be the only real complaint. And the contrast has been jacked up. That's kind of the way Leica portraits work. Also, I need to mention that the edge detection on the Oppo is not exactly perfect. Just look around my shoulders. Now then for 35mm, once again master portraits on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. And see, this is something that the Oppo doesn't exactly do, because it just doesn't have the option to do that minor little crop from the main camera. Unfortunate in terms of flexibility, but still. It looks nice, but again, a lot of blue happening, especially in the shadows. I mean, my hair looks bluish, my t-shirt looks bluish, everything. The Xiaomi, again, this is looking really nice. I usually end up complaining about the way the Xiaomi's portraits turn out, but it would appear as though things have changed. They've taken a turn for the better, because even with Leica portraits, I half expected it to just blow out everything in the background and also like half of my face, but no. It is definitely living on the edge with the high contrast look, but it looks good. If you don't like high contrast, go for the master portraits. As you can tell, it looks really nice. Personally speaking, however, with the 50mm mode, I do prefer how the Find X7 Ultra looks. It seems to have resolved its problems with the bluish tones in my shadows, and it looks significantly better. And so we have Leica portraits on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra for that very reason. And it's not, again, as nice to my eyes personally as the Find X7 Ultra here, but it does look really good on the Xiaomi, which is, again, not something I've ever said before. Very odd, I know, but that's just the way it is. Also, I should absolutely point out, the Find X7 Ultra seems to have fixed that yellowing issue that I was having in just the previous comparison I made. Look, I don't believe I got a software update, but it feels like I did, because I don't know, I have to check again, but a lot of problems that I was having previously with the Find X7 Ultra have been fixed. And the same goes for the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, because yes, in this case I would say it's a little overexposed with the master portraits, but it's not particularly bad considering the lighting situation and all that jazz. I don't think the Xiaomi is not doing as good of a job as the Oppo, but it's not horrible, and that really, really says a lot. Like, if you don't believe me, check out the previous camera comparisons I did with the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. You'll realize just how much better these portraits look. Also, Leica portraits, once again, high contrast. Again, just living on the bloody edge with the high contrast, and just look at the edge of my face and my arm. It is just on the cusp of being blown out, but it's not. Speaking of blown out, of course, let's check out the backlit portrait, and again, the Xiaomi is doing about as good a job as I could have expected. The Oppo is also doing a fairly good job, but I do need to point out again, the Find X7 Ultra seems to have this issue at 1x specifically, where it just gives you these bluish tones in the shadows. Similar story again with Leica portraits. Look, hallelujah. Xiaomi appears to have fixed the massive issues that we were having with portraits. Hell, I think I can wholeheartedly recommend this phone even for regular photography, because the portraits look stunning. No question about it. That is insane. That is mind-blowing. And now finally we have the night portraits. To be honest, I think overall the Oppo is doing a slightly better job. Like, it has more details, and the general balance on the contrast also looks really nice. I do think that the Xiaomi skin tones look a little too reddish. It's a minor complaint, but overall the Oppo is definitely taking the win here. Now then, finally, let us check out night mode. So, the one thing that I can tell you without a shadow of doubt is that both of these phones, for regular photos, especially if you're shooting outdoors or have the night sky in the background, it's gonna look stunning. Especially if you're using Leica Authentic on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. You could use Leica Vibrant and you'll get brighter and generally flatter looking shots with less contrast and more shadow detail, just so you know. But of course, obviously, I prefer the higher contrast look on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra and the very realistic nighttime looks that it can do. However, when taking this indoor shot, it just goes without saying that even though yes, it is a backlit situation technically, but still, the Oppo is faring significantly worse as opposed to the Xiaomi. And it is fairly obvious when you crop in. Yes, the Xiaomi does appear to have some amount of processing artifacts present, but with the general exposure being so much better on the Xiaomi and also the details being slightly better represented on the Xiaomi, I think it's just doing an overall better job as opposed to the Oppo here. Now this right here is an ultra low light shot. Essentially, there's so little light falling on the subject itself. The background, which is to say the outside, is acting like a backlight. I mean, you saw exactly how dim the outside was, and that's acting like a backlight in this situation. That's how dim the situation was, really. Anywho, I think both are doing fairly well, but once again the Xiaomi does appear to have a little bit more detail, and yes, it can't get as close to the subject as opposed to the Find X7 Ultra, but yeah, overall, the details do appear to be a little bit better preserved on the Xiaomi. Then of course we have got the ultrawide shot, and just the field of view, the bloody field of view on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, it really is something else, isn't it? It almost feels like I'm using the main camera on the Oppo. I'm not. That's the Ultra, that's the extent of the Ultrawide you're gonna get with the Oppo. But we need to bear in mind, just having a wider field of view doesn't mean it's going to be a better camera, especially at night. And this shot right here, it is a PS resistance for that very statement, because I mean, you can tell, right? The Oppo is doing a monumentally better job. It's got way more brightness, and even from here you can tell probably that it's got significantly more detail. But of course, being the very nice and generous guy that I am, never mind. Here's a cropped in shot at 500%. And yeah, definitely the Oppo is doing a better job. It's not that big a difference, to be entirely fair. It's mostly the fact that the Xiaomi is really underexposing in this particular shot, which is why it looks like it has way less detail. But overall, the Oppo does appear to be doing a slightly better job. Now finally, we can check out zoom at night. You see, there are a lot of telephoto cameras happening between these two phones, so it's only natural that you'd want to at least try it out at night, right? Well, here we go. 3x on both of these phones, and I think the overall colors are much closer to reality on the Find X7 Ultra. It feels a little bit more yellowish than it really was. I mean, I know I spent a year and a half looking at this damn face, but well, it's definitely way too red on the Xiaomi. That much I can tell you without a doubt. Now, of course, with the details, I do believe that the Find X7 Ultra is doing a slightly better job. It looks really faded and as if the processing just doesn't even want to bring out details on the Xiaomi. It's not horrible, but it's not as good either. Finally, we have 5x on the Xiaomi and again 6x on the Find X7 Ultra. It would appear that either the Xiaomi's 5x camera is so damn good that it can expose the shot to this extent, whilst also maintaining a very high level of detail, or it's probably using the 3x to maybe do a hybrid digital crop and just give us a lot of exposure whilst also maintaining a fair degree of detail. What I can tell you is that the Find X7 Ultra is indeed without question using the 6x, and it's not really handling it well now, is it? Not only is it underexposed, the detail levels are just not good enough. And with that, we are at the end of this comparison. Look, the sheer bloody number of improvements between these two phones is mind-boggling. It's just, there's a lot. Okay, that doesn't say much, but the point is that we have a lot of good stuff happening, because I'm genuinely surprised here. The Oppo, for instance, it doesn't have any more of the issues with backlit selfies and selfie portraits. How did that happen? I have no idea, don't even ask. Then of course we have the skin tones in portraits, regular portraits. It's fixed on the Find X7 Ultra. It does appear to have kind of, gone the other way with the 1x shots, with too much bluish tones happening in the shadows, but regardless. Speaking of portraits, by the way, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. Damn, it just improved entirely. I can actually recommend this phone for regular photography now. I don't have to constantly say that yes, this is for professionals, it is meant for pro photography and raw photography and the log video, the master cinema video, that kind of stuff. If you want regular photos, don't even look at the Xiaomi. I don't need to worry about that because the portraits look stunning. No doubt about it. And yes, I do realize that I forgot about the 6x portrait on the Xiaomi, or rather the Find X7 Ultra and the 5x on the Xiaomi. It slipped my mind. I just remembered right now, so apologies for that. Anywho, this is incredible stuff. I need to make another video with another smartphone to figure out exactly where this stands. Yes, the next one obviously is going to be between the Find X7 Ultra and the OnePlus 12. I'll see you guys then. Cheers.